Hello. Hello, everyone. I'm Gemma Starr, and welcome to another episode of Heart Warriors. This is a series I've been inspired and guided to do thanks to my energetic connection to Kata Judah. Kata Judah is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia, very close to Uluru, which is the sacred feminine site. And what I'm here to do is to give a platform to our men to speak of their journey into the heart, to share their experiences, their insights, their wisdom, their tools, their practices, all the juicy bits and tips they picked up along the way to share with other men walking the path, and of course, us women who are seeking a better insight into our men. Today's guest is an activist, a free thinker, very well known in the truth community, and his name is Sacha Stone. So it's my greatest pleasure to have a chat with Sacha today and hear about his journey into the heart. Enjoy. Hello, Sacha Stone. Welcome to Heart Warriors.
Good to meet you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me.
You're such an incredibly articulate man, so I'm really hoping to get an insight into the masculine journey, heart, mind, and soul today. And so that's what the show will be about. Are you aware of Kata Judah? This is the sacred masculine site in Central Australia. It's very close.
No, I'm
to
not.
Uluru.
No, it looked. I thought it was Uluru, except for the breaches that I've just seen in it. Very interesting.
Yeah, so that's the energy that's coming through today. Sacha, how would you describe the man you are today?
Oh Christ, that's a really tough and nasty question to hijack me with. My only real quality that I revere is my disdain for bullying and for so-called authority. I have an innate, intrinsic, visceral hatred for the third-party intervention, which I metaphorically refer to as the Catholic Church, which is to say government, which is to say Anthony Fauci and his godless little injections. Anything that seeks to breach human and thereby divine sovereignty is repugnant to my soul. And so it is that quality within myself that I revere and would never give up. So irreverence is a healthy trait. Lack of boundaries is another healthy trait. I'm born with an innate disdain for boundaries as well, all boundaries. And I've gone into this very in my own mind. I've looked at this and I've thought, well, how shocking is it for somebody to say all boundaries should be destroyed in a time, in an age when everyone is trying to define healthy boundaries. But the point being that healthy boundaries are the most repugnant, because there is no such thing as a healthy boundary. All boundaries speak to fear and speak to the absence of the quantum, the absence of the divine supernature, which is our true birthright. So if I'm my living flame, I cannot recognize boundaries of any order of magnitude. I don't need to set them, and I don't need to recognize them. And I certainly don't need others to set them for me, because if I am operating in my divine supernature, I will be profoundly sensitive to other people's sensitivities and sensibilities. And I would never transgress or defile other people's sensitivities and sensibilities, because the foundation stone to natural law is cause no harm, loss, or injury to another living soul. That's it, So that's why I say that setting boundaries is repugnant, because it invites us into cauterizing and limiting our own supernature and defining ourselves as caged animals that should be caged from one another. No, good God, no. The lion should lay down with the lamb. That's the quantum realm. That's the kingdom of heaven on earth, and I'll settle for nothing less. Thank you.
Oh, I love it. So, is that another way of saying that freedom is a paramount quality of the masculine journey? Is that what the masculine seeks?
Well, in as much as am I able to speak bluntly on your show, or should I
Oh,
couch my
yes. I
language
mean, we're on YouTube, but please, however
right?
you wish to
Okay,
express.
so this tiptoes into the sort of primal arena of a man's sexuality and the man's innate predisposition to fuck as many women as possible. Which of course in the sanitized liberal mind becomes making love. How dare we refer to sex as being what it is foundationally, which is a delightfully animalistic urge to express and to engage ecstasy and orgasmic release and all the rest of it. But this notion of men being monogamized, for me, I've really looked at that because I am by nature polyamorous. I've never defined myself in a monogamous relationship in the past. I have not. I don't find it wrong in any way. I don't find it repugnant in any way. But my own nature has been such that I have not sought a monogamous relationship. I've not ever looked to settle down. I've not looked to create family and to define my life in that particular rudimentary way. And again, I love it for friends and that I see how they express in their own lives the familial kinship. It's a beautiful thing, and family and children and monogamy, very beautiful. And I've looked at certain monogamous relationships, not many, mind you. I'm not aware of many that are successful, but the 2 or 3 examples in my life that have shone have made me think what a beautiful engagement that is, when it is 2 souls perfectly cohered, into one living flame. What a beautiful, beautiful thing. So I understand very much the sanctity of monogamy, and I respect it deeply. It's just that I don't personally relate to it. And it's not because I'm getting laid every night, because I'm not. I wish I were. I'm not at all. My life for decades has not been that kind of creature, But it's really not even about the sex. It's because I've looked at this long and hard. It's about the way in which a monogamous man is forced to disidentify from certain foundational aspects of his primal nature and to conform and comport his nature into an idiom, into a particular mold. And all I see emerge from that idiom or that mold, especially as the years roll by, is a sense of destitution at the primal level. I think a man should be free to express himself, and a woman should be free to express herself fully. The way that if they feel that, if they don't, then it's perfect. It's perfect that they're monogamously in tune. But if in a relationship, a monogamous relationship, there is a deep need to express sexuality outside of that covenant, and let's not talk about the covenant, that's the gift of the Catholic Church in the main, but then I think that people should be authentic enough within their own nature to say, fuck it, I need to break the pattern. I need to express, I need to make love to X, Y, or Z, because this is a deep, abiding soul stream that I need to express. So for me, it's each man in his own way, in his own time, as long as we're not causing injury to others, and as long as we're being foundationally authentic and honest with self being more important than anything else. Because if you can't live with yourself, you sure as hell won't make any kind of relationship for anyone else in this world. So for me, when we talk about a man and defining masculinity, I think it's foolhardy of us not to go back to that source code of sex and sexuality. Honestly, if we're looking at the primal nature. But then I see the same thing, the same flame I see in women, the same geometry I see in women. I don't see women as being any different to men when it comes to even that primal urge. And I think that the way in which our contemporaneous society or culture is evolving in technicolor, I find it pretty terrifying, very pornographicized, very amoral and immoral, bestial, actually. If I flip through Instagram or Facebook and just go to the stories that come through the feed in the generic stories, I'm seeing the lionizing and adulation of 20-cent porn stars who've now got their own, daily blog, and it's all about, how out of control they can be and get away with on YouTube. And I find that terrifying, that kind of pornographicizing and normalizing of hardcore anything, whether it's drink, drugs, fist fights in the street, because that's another thing we're seeing a lot of these memes on YouTube. Everyone wants to see everyone else, punching each other's lights in drunken brawls. And apparently a lot of people in the world need to get the adrenal rush from seeing injury being caused, whether it's to young girls through pornography or if it's to bums in the street having their heads kicked in by gangs of jackals, and then that stuff being posted up on YouTube. And the MMA, the sort of wrestling and the fighting going on in these cages, that's become this huge popular cultural meme of how vicious and nasty and bloodthirsty and gladiatorial can we become as a society. Well, that's pure bestial pornography again, to see blood splattered on the canvas and people surrounding a little cage and getting off on that. And the collective elemental energetics that feed off that are terrifying. We're talking about very, very demonic forces that are able to gain traction into this earthly plane precisely because so many people are getting caught up in the pornography and the bestiality of a perverted and dystopian culture. So men today are clearly lacking in fiber. And I don't like to say moral fiber, but it's the only word I can use, because I don't like morality in the Christian sense or morality in the kind of Victorian sense that we refer to it as. Morality kind of became another cage system for humanity, which was imposed by the Victorian and Edwardian era and didn't serve humanity at all. It just fucked us up culturally and turned us into highly repressed, sexually and intellectually and psycho-emotionally repressed generations of people came out of that, and a lot of cancer came out of that, so we need to learn the art of disidentifying altogether for the need to have boundaries or to impose boundaries, other than to stand in truth and conduct right action in our lives with a razor blade. I mean, to be so laser sharp in our own scrutiny of our own actions and our own thoughts. That to me is really what a man defines. A man is somebody who is awake, alert, primal, ready to tear the throat out of any ghouls or demons or devils that may come and assail the angelic human. Yeah.
Wow, wow, amazing. Sasha, let's go back and see, where did the war on masculinity start? And can we condense that into the past 100 years, and really so people can identify with where healthy masculinity was hijacked and we got into this state of chaos with our men?
I'm not clever enough to know the cosmological or anthropological roots. And there are other minds, brains out there far greater than mine who could speak to it with great accuracy. All I can do is speak intuitively to that theme. And the modern era, which is to say the last couple of thousand years, the AC/DC bullshit, AD/BC bullshit, which of course is a false nexus point in history. But let's just look at that, the last 2,000 years, and you could go back, in fact, 10,000 years to the time of the ancient prophets, when Moses and all the rest of it. There is these figureheads, these male figureheads, the prophets, whether you're talking about Moses or you're talking about Jesus, or to some extent Prophet Muhammad, peace upon him. You're talking about benevolent patriarchs, feminized males who are balanced within themselves. Noah and these figures. I'm not so sure about Abraham, but the point being, I think that the patriarchy is a misnomer. My understanding of the greater cosmogenetic backstory to here and now is that we are living within the thrall of actually a feminine paradigm. If you study the Orion Wars, and you study the Syrian Wars, and you study the galactic wars that precede these ages that we remember and that we now live through, you will find, I think, that we trace the echo back to a female, a matriarchy at that very, very high level. And I'm not well versed enough in that cosmogenetic history to be able to speak to it with you right now with any degree of accuracy. I just invite people to really look in to that. Go beyond the sons of Belial and the brotherhood of the snake. Go behind all of those stories. Really pierce the veil, and I think you will find that we are actually all in these distant echoes, living actually in a matriarchy. And that I asked the question once of one of the world's greatest anthropologists, a man, Professor Dejo Benedek, who is an anthropologist, cultural anthropologist in the United States, a Romanian anthropologist, a man who speaks 27 languages, and knows more about everything than almost everyone alive, past and present. And I had the great delight to know him a number of years ago. We had a slight falling out because he's a pain in the ass in many ways, but he's a very, very brilliant man. And I did ask him the question, about what is really behind, what is the real backdrop, what is the source code to all the cultural stories and the memes and the patterns and the narratives that proliferate from Botswana to Alaska, all around the world. Tens of thousands of languages that are spoken, and tribes and different types. And I know because I was the one who commissioned over 20 years ago the study by Dr. Benedict and his faculty to identify the 1,000 principal tribes on earth, and the definition of in that scientific and academic research project, which took about a year, the definition that I gave, or the criteria that I gave to the university, was each of these tribes has to have a different god, a different song, and a different song, a different god, and a different language. Wow. Completely different. And I think a year later, when I went to the university to see how the research project was coming on, he said, well, we got to 10,000 and then stopped, because actually the more you look into it, the more infinite is the scope and the spectrum of the human family. It's unbelievable. But I asked him the question, what is the commonality with all of these stories? If you were to take a thread from every single story, what would the most apparent commonality be as an image, as an idea, as an icon, as an archetype? What is it? Thinking he was going to say it was going to be a kind of Methuselah character in the clouds with a great big flowing beard and, able to, command the oceans and the firmament. No, it wasn't that. He said, you really don't want to know what the common thread is. And I said, well, I actually really do. He said, it's a great big fucking spider a female grandmother spider at the very, very center of the omniverse.
Wow.
Yeah, big wow. Big, big wow. So that is, by best accounts of the greatest academic I know in cultural anthropology and cosmology, is a grandmother spider. That, if that doesn't define a matriarchal meta paradigm, I don't know what does. So again, before we too eagerly start to speak about, the patriarchy in our little window of reference on Earth, let's remember that we have matriarchies that refract into patriarchies, and the point being that when we come to the end of days, which we've clearly arrived at, surely it's about transmuting, synthesizing, and transcending the duality altogether of whether it's a masculine or a feminine, a matriarchy or a patriarchy. Surely we get to a point where we must only begin to explore the divine communion of Alpha Omega in the fully realized Christed being.
So it's such a fascinating story. Thank you for sharing that, Sacha. Have you got anything to say about what happened around World War II as regards to our men when they were sent off to war and women were asked to fill in the factory positions? And what did that do to the family and the maybe the wounding of the masculine collective?
Well, it was designed. You're talking about the First World War, the Second World War, or both of them?
Wherever you'd like to take it.
Well, let's speak about them both, because let's speak about war per se, which has really been a phenomenon of the last century. The war really only kicked in 1914, 1916. You could predate that and go back to the Battle of Waterloo, the Napoleonic Wars, which were happening also all around, principally Europe, which led to the World War I and then World War II, which led to World War III, which has been fully underway for decades now. If you understand realpolitik and the fact that over 85 wars have been taking place on the face of the earth constantly over the last few generations, ongoing to this very day, whether you're talking about Yemen and Sudan or Zimbabwe, where I grew up, Rhodesia, war is now a perennial industry. And more than that, war is become industrialized and socialized and normalized, to the perverse extent that our satanic governments or corporations masquerading as governments, privately owned corporations that are masquerading as governments, are at war with the citizenry and are butchering them, are forcing them into early death syndrome, whether it's vaccination programs or whether it's poisoning the citizenry through air, water, and soil and every single godless product that fits on a supermarket shelf, all of them in compliance with government rules and regulations and codes and codices. So you see, when you really understand the nature of war, you recognize it's not a group of men with cannon blowing each other up in a valley. That was a very clean kind of war. It was honest at the very least. We're talking about the weaponization of the biosphere, which is government sponsored, issues through the Catholic Church and the Vatican complex and the Jesuit orders, the Midnight Masons, and all the motherfuckers in secret societies over the last couple of centuries who have fomented this kind of industrialized evil that proliferates across the surface of the earth. And the glue that binds all of it is money, is usury, is profiteering and racketeering. The only reason why the era of covidiocy and Faucism has managed to sustain for 2.5 odd years, killing God knows how many humans, the toll has not been taken. It will be in the days ahead, but it will be seen to be very, very considerable. If that's not a war against humanity, I don't know what is. If mRNA intervention at this multinational level, enforced by public administrators and the compliances of these satanic governments, I don't know what is, if that's not industrial death, which is war by definition. So it's very hard for me. You speak to someone who inhabits a quantum mindset. I don't see any difference between the Napoleonic Wars and Anthony Fauci perpetrating ritual Satanism in the proverbial basement. It's all part of the same orchestra of evil which prevails and is underpinned again by the priest bankers, by money, money being the totem of time that represents time in 3D. That's all that money is. It represents time. And time is the greatest fiction, the most egregious fiction of all, which holds us in a civilizational dream spell and keeps us tethered to the false light matrix because we believe in the tick-tock of time and that we're running out of time and we're running out of air and we're running out of water, we're running out of everything all the time. Well, that's just the scarcity program that's been promulgated by the priest bankers, installed into the matrix precisely in order to keep us all mind fucked in a dystopian tailspin, but more than that, to harvest our life force at this meta-industrial level. So war is ritual satanic practice on certain geographical locations, a form of esoteric hyperdimensional chess being played by proxies on the earth plane, masquerading as military leaders and as political leaders who do the orchestration, but they are answering to demonic forces and elemental cloud intelligences, egregores, that themselves are driving their mortal proxies in these war games. And the real deal being that the life force of these blessed idiot people who sign up for the wars and send their kids off to the wars, and the death and disease, or death and destructivity that happens, and disease and poverty as a result of war. And I know I speak as an expert on the matter, somebody who survived war for 16, 17 years of my life as a child. The real deal is that we're being harvested energetically our suffrage, our misery, our pain is feeding these demonic constructs in the hyperdimensional spheres. Nothing to freak out about. It's just important to understand the physics, the hyperdimensional physics or the mechanics of how this plays out in order for you to then go, enough. I'm not participating in that. I will be the line in the sand, and I will no longer be a resource or a utility of these demonic forces, or to the best of my ability in any event. We all need to break the rules a little bit here or there, and not be too strict with ourselves. But you take my point.
Oh, definitely. So much clarity around that. Thank you, Sacha. At the end, we can get into, I'd really like to hear about your message to men who are coming into that awareness. But you did talk now about growing up in war-torn Rhodesia, and that you called yourself a survivor there. Would you like to take us back to your greatest challenge as a child?
I was just writing about it earlier today for the first time in my life. I was writing about a seminal moment of standing at night. I must have been 7 years old, standing late at night, holding the wires of a security fence and looking out into the African bush, with the sound of the military who were patrolling the perimeter fence. I was locked in with about 22 or 23 other kids into a high security boarding school in the Cashel Valley, which was the school was placed in the valley really for security purposes. And we had sort of razor wires and very high security perimeter fencing, and with alarm systems and floodlights and helicopters on idle, and not stones throw away, ready for evacuations, and 24 hours a day, fully kitted military soldiers with machine guns and on patrol, and constant crunch of their boots in the African bush just around the perimeter. And I would go every night and creep out of the dormitory, sneak out through the grenade screens, and go to a particular spot where I would hold the fence and look into the distance, because that was a silhouette of a mountain in the distance that I'd last seen my mother being taken away from me a year earlier, and I'd not seen her since, and I was sort of dying in 1,000 different ways as a child, as one does. But every night I would repeat that same sort of, I guess, a ritual of sorts, But it was very, very desperate and and sad for obvious reasons. And I did that night after night. For Christ, it must have been 2-3 years, and projecting my I wouldn't call it fear particularly, because I was so caught up. I mean, there were tracer bullets in the sky every night, and the sound of machine guns rolling in the distance pretty much, throughout those years, and always the threat of imminent death. And then from one week to the next, one or two of the kids wouldn't come back because they'd been butchered at the nearby farm and murdered. And so there was this kind of dragnet slowly coming in to us in that school in the Cashel Valley, and until one fine day we were shaken out of bed at the early hours of the morning, and then evacuated within minutes because it was known that Frelimo terrorists were descending and coming in to slaughter us. And thankfully the scouts found that out just in time, but discovered that there were photographs, Polaroids of all of the kids, and notes taken in the encampments in the mountains. They'd been monitoring the kids, and they were planning to do a massacre and kill the 23 kids and leave us all butchered for the world to see, to make a point. Anyway, I'm getting away with this, but the point is that was for me, those nights of looking out and looking at into the distance of where my mother had last seen her being driven, down the bush roads towards that mountain. That was for me the signature, the stigmata that was burnt into my soul as a child. And I was just wondering, is there any escape from this death, this spiral of death, this dread, this mortal dread, this threat of imminent murder and butchery? Alarms constantly going off, floodlights, and ducking under the bed, and having to strip the guns every night in the dormitory, and polish them and oil them, and learn how to strip a rifle and reassemble it in 35 seconds. I mean, 7-year-old fucking child, I ask you. And that went on for years. It was horrid. And that was, another thing I remembered, we had no sweeties, and we didn't have anything that normal kids in the world would have. And we were so desperate, we would take out toothpaste and make little blobs of toothpaste on our little suitcases and put the suitcases under our beds in the dormitory and wait for 3 weeks for them to dry. And then we'd share toothpaste sweets with each other in the dormitory. We were that deprived as kids of even a fucking piece of chocolate, So it wasn't fun, but it was powerful. It was loaded. And certainly it was the perfect furnace within which to forge my particular irreverence. And I won't use the word hatred in my life, but my absolute contempt for authority. Why? Because I saw that was the net result of authority, was a blessed 7-year-old boy bleeding in the Christed heart for 1,000 nights under the African sky. That should never be allowed to happen. And I was the lucky one because I survived. In any event, that was the furnace within which I forged, to answer your question. Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing that, Sacha. May I ask then, how did you deal with that as a 7-year-old child emotionally? And what coping mechanism did you use to survive that and ultimately to start healing from it?
I don't know. I've never stopped long enough to think about it. I've never been into analysis, or I've never had the conversation with therapists or with empaths to go into it. I never wanted to sit on the carpet and tell sad tales. And I've never really wanted to be the man who speaks and bleats about his inner pain. That's not sexy to me. So I've avoided that, into my middle age, and I still don't go there. And it's only, like I said, curiously enough, today that I've written just a little memo to self. I just wanted to remind myself of that time, and I wanted to get clarity. So I wrote it down to be able to then edit it and see if that was the account. And it was the account, and I recounted it to you. But I don't have a metric or a method. I didn't sweep it under the carpet, put it that way. I think I've been authentic enough within myself and to myself. I've been authentic enough within myself and to myself. Blunt enough to myself to face down my demons and the horrors, which is what led me to have enough courage, I think, a number of years ago, to really go into the ritual satanic abuse and the child human trafficking and the child sex trafficking stuff, which led to the International Tribunal for Natural Justice, which I then set up, and the judicial commissions of inquiry into these different arenas, because it occurred to me in my authentic review of my own suffrage as a child, in order to cope, to get to your question, in order to cope, I needed to see what may have been worse for others. And in so doing, that led me into those stories, and then to researching and understanding how real they were, and then me wanting to help redeem others, survivors and victims. And more than that, to begin the process of pure inquiry in order to understand the spiritual dimension and physics behind those horrible, horrible stories. What is the rationale? What is the godly reason? What is the divine geometry? Where does it make sense? It has to make sense. And I believe I found it. I believe I discovered that. And in my counseling of survivors, and I've done an awful lot of counseling of survivors of ritual satanic abuse and pedophilia and trafficking and so on. Thousands and thousands of hours of counseling, which I've done. And I've always helped to bring I think I've succeeded in the main in bringing some real remedy into the hearts and minds of these so-called victims. I don't call them victims. Survivors, yes, but not victims. Precisely by explaining to them that there is no victim ever, cannot be. And that once we remove this false notion of victimhood from anything whatsoever, and recognize that we are all avatars, all pioneers, and we're all engineers, architects, and geometers of the journey of the soul, and all of the incredible expressions that we manifest in this world and in other worlds. We are the progenitors. We are the alpha and the omega. Even if I'm having a fucked up, painful existence in a particular life or incarnation, grace exists wherein I have the pure grace to be able to recognize that I am not a victim of circumstance or a victim of my life or a victim of anything, that I have elected this geometry upon the lesser self by the greater self in order to transmute and transcend lower forms of expression into higher octaves of expression, which is to say, forging the fabric of soul into higher, ever higher expressions. And that's a very labyrinthine conversation to look at the physics of that. Perhaps in another conversation we would have the time to do it. But authenticity and truth to oneself, which is the ability to see one's own reflection in the mirror without blinking, is really the source code.
Amazing, Sacha. Can we break that process down to maybe someone who's hearing this for the first time about, well, I mean, I would call it a soul agreement, and something that I, on a higher level, I chose to experience this pain and suffering for my own opportunity for growth.
Yeah.
So the way you explained it is beautiful for someone who's maybe already got some understanding of the process. How could you break it down to basics for someone hearing this concept that there's no victimhood for the first time?
Well, there's two applications here. One is where the story that's unfolding is a fated story. It's connected to the, let's call it the karma of the individual, and they have elected and engineered their life in a certain way in order to experience certain things, precisely in order that they can burn off karmic debt, so to speak, and to qualify the fabric of their soul and move into pure coherence. But first they have to forge a higher expression within themselves, and knowing that at the higher oversoul level, we then construct and architect and design our lives accordingly, our incarnations accordingly. So that is one. It's the fated, destined trajectory. But there is another application, which is that of the avatar or the bodhisattva, which is the angelic soul comes into the earth in order to be of service to others at the expense of themselves, and to, in a great sense, sacrifice an aspect or much of themselves. The whole story, apocryphal or real, of Jesus, the Master Jesus, and the resurrection, the crucifixion and the resurrection, all speaks to that. That is the pulse of the human being, is that we are all the Christed ones. We are all the messianic ones. We are all the redeemers. We are the cavalry. But only when we evolve beyond this reflexive, psycho-emotional victim mentality. So that's where it becomes essential to recognize the majesty of how we architect things. The example I've given in many different media drops and conversations is of the infant being sacrificed on the altar of a ritual satanic mass by black hooded Babylonian priests. Who is in control of that venue? It's not the Satanists. It's not the hooded priests. They are the tawdry, stricken, woeful, demonic sons of bitches. That's what they are, and there's many of them. The one who's in control of that venue is the soul of the infant on the block, who is allowing their own blood to be imbibed in order to plant the light seed in the heart of darkness. So when these satanic creatures drink the blood or the adrenal chrome, what they're taking in may give them a false rush. Yes, absolutely. But it's also a poison to them. It's the greatest poison they will ever know, because it will ultimately bring them on their journey toward the light. And they've got a whole lot of hurting to do before they enjoy the light fully. But it will be the thing that turns them. So it's how the seed, the atom seed of light, is placed into the dark heart, the geometry of the dark heart.
Wow, and such a amazing example, really something for people to think about, the ultimate sacrifice. Would you say, let's bring it back to the masculine journey, this escape from victimhood could we simplify it into victims give their power away and survivors reclaim it? Is that a pivotal point in the masculine journey, reclaiming power?
Well, I don't really know much about the masculine journey. I've never really looked at it, so I can't speak to it. I've never related to masculinity within my own nature. I revere the femininity in my nature more than the masculinity, probably because the feminized aspect of my journey is the one that is intuitive, the one that that saves the day and steers me out of trouble. So it's that aspect or element within my own nature which I wouldn't want to lose, and so I revere it, and I try to foster it to the best of my ability. I've never tried to strut as a masculine, as a male. I've never tried to. I've been naturally lucky with women in my life, and with men. I mean, friends. I attract people, and I've been very blessed in the main in life. So I've not tried to overcompensate, going to gyms and pump up my muscles and, punch people in the face in street fights to prove myself. Mind you, I've done a little bit of that. I won't go there right now. But the point the point being, I've never really sat with the masculine story within myself. I think I spent most of my life running like hell from the patriarch because of the militarization that I grew up in, which was so masculine. So it was so tough. It was so manly that's why I've never cut my hair. I mean, my hair's down to here if it's not in a knot in my back of my head. I've never cut my hair in my life because since I was that child, because I didn't want to look and feel like a man. I didn't want to look and feel like a woman either, but I didn't want to play that game. That role was pretty rank to me, So I've ended up being this weird hybrid, fucked up, dispossessed, half androgyne type character who's very masculine in my sexuality, but very feminized in my spiritualized, philosophical, and moral disposition. And I despise authority and violence, but I love guns. And I don't know. I'm just a confused hybrid human being.
Sacha, could we look at that masculinity that you grew up with as being a wounded form of masculinity? And what would the balance of that be to you? What would healthy masculinity look like?
Well, I think I don't want to sound churlish, but I think healthy masculinity looks more or less like me. And that's my honest answer. That's my honest answer, because I know that I'm a healthy masculine. I know that that I've arrived. Mind you, it's taken an awful long time. I mean, I'm not a youngster, and I know that I can carry myself as a man where that is needful and righteous. But at the same time, I will not allow that tyrant. I will not allow that patriarch. I will not allow that that fist fighter to eclipse my my base nature. I won't allow that to happen. So I think that a life which is given in the main in service, and I don't say it's service to others, it's service to self every bit as much as it is service to others. I can only function in my skin if I am in service in this world, if I'm seeking remedy every single day of my life. So every single day of my life, I must seek remedy, must. And I do. And I go far out of the box to do that. And I irritate and piss off a hell of a lot of people and institutions. And I'm sure there are many arrows and silver bullets with my name on them. I've ducked and dodged a few. But that notwithstanding, that's of no consequence. To wake up every day and seek remedy in this world is what I'm talking about. That is the father. That is the true father. That is the true brother. That is the true warrior. That is the true elder. Must take that position, must take up the staff, must lead from the front, must open the door. Never hide behind the sofa when the doorbell goes. You must open the door. You must pick up the telephone when it rings. You must address these shadows, these threats head on as a man. I've learned that. But you mustn't do it to the extent that you become tyrannical. Yes. You must always yeah, I'll leave it at that. I'll leave it.
Beautiful explanation. Sacha, can we move into your adulthood now and bring it back to the heart? Are you able to share with us your most heart-wrenching moment? And did that break you open?
No, I wouldn't do that respectfully. I wouldn't. I
Okay.
wouldn't want to share my most heart-wrenching moment with some wonderful strangers. That's not in my repertoire, because those heart-wrenching moments are profoundly sanctified spaces that need to be honored and in that sense, not compartmentalized, but they must be revered in a degree of stillness and quietude. And I've to a great extent been too exposed already through social media and through lots of reckless and ugly trolling and people who have fabricated a lot of lies about me. And I understand how those lies have been fabricated. And I understand how characters like myself become the object of scrutiny and the object of controversy. I have that instinct in myself. I also have a little bit of that creature that wants to find controversy, wants to find a scandal, wants to find a little adrenal rush in, some sensational hoo-ha, whether, looking at a Russell Brand character or any one of these kind of fringe icon figures, archetypal figures that are batting really between the polarities and are not clearly defined. Like Sacha Stone is not a clearly defined archetype. It's a very confusing archetype to many people, and I get that. And so the irony is I'm the one who had the balls a long time ago to hack into the United Nations and get into the basement there, unsalaried. I never took a dime, but for a couple of years, and was able to wield some real influence in that venal institution, and was learning about the source coding and understanding also how many good people are trapped inside those systems of multilateral governance. And I was doing that as a service to myself and to the world to get in there, leopard crawling in the middle of the night with a fucking dagger in my teeth. It was dangerous, and it was dangerous work. And I did it. And subsequent to that, because when I then pulled out of the UN, because I was so appalled at how China was already buying into the basement of the United Nations. This is 2009, 2010. So I was calling China out 13 years ago. A lot, long before Donald Trump was calling out China. I was screaming about it.
Yeah.
Names, faces, places. I was calling out the Chinese billionaires who were financing the fucking Clintons back in 2009, 2010. I was screaming from the rooftops. I was kicking doors down. I was making such a noise and a fuss in the UN about the hegemony of the Chinese cultural Marxism that was marching through the back door. No one knows about that. No one listens to the intellectual conversations I have on this subject. All they do is say, oh, he worked for the UN, he's one of them, and so that then becomes the thing. And Sacha works for must be controlled opposition. So then controlled opposition, works for the other side, Vatican agent, crown agent. I'm the man speaking against the crown, speaking against the institutions for a lot longer than almost anyone else, other than maybe David Icke and one or two other, G. Edward Griffin, But I've been around, I'm a veteran. I've been around longer than 99% of these fucking upstarts and some of them delightful upstarts in the so-called truth movement. I could wipe the floor with 99% of them in any conversation on any subject, and occasionally I do. but I'm not adversarial, and I don't want to be taking sticks to people who are in the truth movement. And I never slander or defame people in the public domain, not unless they're public figures, like the Queen of England, or Klaus Schwab, or Leonardo fuckwit DiCaprio, who I can't stand. All of these icons who are promulgating climate change and selling that grotesque lie to humanity, which is really a cover story for scarcity economics, which is central banking 2.0, and the world can't see that stuff coming. I can see that stuff coming, which is why I'm calling out certain public figures. But other than that, I would never speak ill of people, even the ones who are attacking me. I won't name and shame them in the public domain, because that's a breach of natural justice. I'm sorry, I've kind of gone off on a tangent
No,
there.
I totally get that. So, what I'm interested to know, Sacha, is how does a man such as yourself, who is the recipient of these attacks and slander and trolling, how do you deal with that?
Well, I deal with it by dealing with it, by not identifying with any of the guff that comes out. So if I'm and I've spoken about this in a few interviews, even in the course of the last year, because it's come up time and time again. Because it used to be, up until nowadays, I have a 99.5% favorability rating with most media drops. I know, because from time to time I see them on YouTube or on Rumble, and I'll go and look at the comments, I'll look at the thumbs up, thumbs down, and I'm incredibly fortunate that I get a huge favorability. It's really 99 point some percent, whereas the average truther has got maybe 78%, or say if they're lucky 83% favorability. So I know I've forged a voice that many people receive kindly, and then are kind to me in return. So I've got no complaints. It's just that the trolls that are, in some instances, paid to try to fuck up my game. And I know, because we've researched them and sent in private investigators, and we've actually found out money and who's behind a couple of these characters. And their day is coming. Believe you me, their day is coming. So that for me is a part of the game, which is not fun, when you have spent a quarter of a century really in a lot of very, let me not exaggerate it, not a lot, but in a number of very dangerous incidents which were life-threatening, very serious incidents. And I've put myself into the flame, into the fire, and to then see these controlled narratives coming out about me, and little films being made about me and my family, and saying the most egregious and hateful and wicked, evil things about me and about my kin. That's not fun. And when you can't lash out because these grubby little characters always hide.
Yeah.
They always hide and cloak themselves, and they throw rocks at the back of your head when you're walking down a path, a dimly lit path in the forest at night. Well, that's the easiest thing in the world to do, is to be one of those tawdry little villains that simply has a rock and waits for an innocent person to walk past, and then throw the rock at the back of their head. But that's exactly what this kind of research trolling is. It's dim-witted digital warriors, armchair warriors, trying to achieve clickbait by hating on popular icons like myself, or figures. I say icons within that social media fringe. I'm not bigging myself up. But at the same time, I know my power, I know my grace, and I know my influence. And I'm very grateful that I have a voice. And that's something else that occurred to me earlier today in reflection that I was doing. It just occurred to me how incredibly lucky I am that at any given moment I can like pick up a telephone, I can, tap in, to a thread, and I can see, literally, I can read on a given day 2,000-3,000 comments, kind ones, nice ones, some of them incredibly loving and uplifting for me. And I just think, my God, how lucky am I that if I'm feeling low or despondent or have a bad self-image today, I can just go and get some love from complete strangers. And Jesus, what an absolute blessing that is. So that's kind of that's the nice side of it, is having so much, being showered with so much affection and kindness and love. And oh, when I get it from old men, for me, it's the best thing in the world. And I have a lot of old men who are my fans, and men in their 70s and 80s who are farmers, who are military guys, former intel guys, some of them former people in diplomatic corps and in politics, and parliamentarians, some of them even like religious leaders, but elders, male elders, who reach out to me and write me love letters, touches me more deeply than anything else on earth. Because that for me is the success right there. The success is that my voice, one way or the other, has managed to forge into some kind of timbre of pure truth that resonates with these aged, feminized patriarchs. And that to me is a success that I wouldn't trade for anything in the world.
Well, that is such a beautiful glimpse into your heart, Sacha. Thank you for sharing that. We've got about half an hour left. Where would you like to take this conversation? What else would you like to say about either your own journey or masculinity or the truther movement? Where would you like to take it?
I'm not the one to ask. I'm very, very bad at driving a conversation in that way. So I'm really happy just to jive on anything and everything. But I don't feel that there's anything that I particularly need to speak to. I mean, the theme that I generally gravitate around is connected to kindness and the need to keep kindness as the golden thread of Ariadne. That has to be the source code of our engagement, our exchange, human to human. When we remember kindness to self more than anything else, I have to say that kindness to self. I found myself earlier today making the bed in a state of real emotional distress because of certain things that are going on right now in my life that are pretty agonizing. And I heard myself saying to myself, stop, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so hard on yourself. Be kind, Sacha. Be kind to yourself. I actually said it, came out as an utterance. I was that caught up in beating myself up internally. And it just reminded me, no, be kind. Be kind to yourself. And if you're not kind to yourself, you sure as hell are not going to be able to extend authentic kindness to others, particularly. You just become one of those fucked up old women who loves cats and is, ostensibly nice to people, but actually is very, very caught up in psychosexual jealousy and turmoil, and just never confronted her own life, and ends up just, sublimating everything and surrogating all of her love, unrequited love, into cats and poodles. A very sad outcome in a life, but many, many people end up that way because they're sublimating and they're not authentically loving and being kind, but they come across as being kind to strangers, but they're not. Yeah. That's just their way of getting through the day more easily, and to be received with a smile is easier than not, but I'm talking about real kindness, the kind of kindness that makes you drive down the highway, on a busy day, and look out of your window and see a stray dog on the other side of the road, and to actually actually go out of your way to hit the next roundabout, go back, park up your car, put up your hazards, fuck your day, fuck your business, fuck your meeting, fuck anything. The only thing in the world that matters right now is that creature in distress. And just do whatever you can do to rescue that creature from distress. That's the kind of kindness I'm talking about. And once we get back in touch with that kind of kindness, this world will change in the blink of an eye for the better.
I love that. So, would you say that's one of your highest values? And would you have another couple of values that you'd like to share with us?
Well, the one that follows on from kindness quite naturally is gratitude. Um, because if one is kind, and with the dispensation of your energy and your time and your motion in your life, if you put kindness out, it always comes back. And when it does, the feedback loop invites you to move into gratitude, and gratitude becomes a very powerful medium for healing and transformation and transmutation. So to be able to also wake up and of a morning and to behold the sky and to navigate through that immediate kick of the mortal dread that you get in the gut, because I've woken up again in a fucking fucked up world with so much pain and suffrage and disease and poverty, and I can hear it in the ethers. I feel the burden of that in the ethers every time I open my eyes into this world. And so that mortal dread wave that hits me the moment it's broken, for me, it's very important. And I don't want to lose that mortal dread, because that's the reckoning. That's the bit that keeps me empathically fully charged and fully alert to suffrage, and to never get into filtering it out and pretending that it's gone somewhere else in this realm, this mortal realm, until we have fully moved into the ascension or the ascendancy, which will come soon enough in our age. But until we've done so, it is incumbent upon us to face fully the mortal dread and to receive the impact of that energetic wave every time we awaken into this world. Because in so doing, we help to absolve it by being cognizant of it and not filtering it. It's the greatest duty of care we can do as angelic humans, is to feel the pain of others as though it were our own, and thereby to help absolve that pain through the linguistic wave genetics or the empathic wave forms that is the true grace of God operating in this world today. So gratitude becomes a vital aspect and element to our own soulful journey. And I invite people to sit with that and to really work at every time the monkey mind says to you, oh God, why me? Why am I going through the suffrage? Whatever it is that you're going through, to stack that alongside the incredible things that you have going in your life, the incredible relationships, memories even, and just really stack your complaint against all of the incredible things that you have to be grateful for. And that's a beautiful way of stepping away from that monkey mind and that complaining, whinging ego mind, and to allow it to move into dissolution, whilst you simply then enjoying a feedback loop of gratitude, kindness, gratitude, kindness, gratitude, kindness. That's a beautiful Dharma wheel to be caught in.
Oh, I totally agree, Sacha. And I feel it's all about, what we're grateful for today creates more to be grateful for tomorrow, and to really get into that gratitude mindset.
Yeah.
Sacha, what have you got to say to men who are really in the deepest, darkest place at the moment and trying to find the light? Where can they start? How can they start spiraling upwards?
By doing it, and there is no other answer. You do something by doing it, and there is no path. There is no method. There is no discipline. There is no mantra. There is no prayer. There is no cavalry. There's no medicament. There's no chariot descending from the clouds. There's no magic wand outside of a perfect reflection in the mirror and being able to look into that reflection unblinking, unflinchingly. Make friends with self. Forgive self. Look squarely into a mirror. Look into the left eye and into the right eye and forgive yourself for all ancestral trauma, for all historic trauma, for all the wheels of dharma and karma that have afflicted you in countless incarnations. Forgive yourself for all your misdemeanors and your trespasses and your crimes, and recognize that every single one of them were divinely anointed and divinely appointed in the perfect geometry of now, which is always perfect in all ways. And then in that acknowledgement, unblinking acknowledgement of your own reflection, you make friends with self. That is the turning point. It's always the turning point. I did it. I did it one fine day in October of 1997 on a particular day. And I remember that. It's when time stood still, because I transmuted and transcended time in that perfect instance of absolute clarity. That was an actualization of my greater self. And it came about through unbearable pain. So it was the pain was the delivery mechanism that led to that perfect moment. But it happened in such an exquisite kind of spiritualized orchestration that I was able to recognize that what we're talking about right now is the source code of regenesis, of resurrection, of redemption, and thereby of salvation. So it always comes down to your relationship with you. And if you get that, because that's alpha omega, and that's when you move alpha omega into phase coherence or phase conjugation, that is ecstasy. Right there is bliss. And that then becomes the new soul stream that takes you forward into a beautiful expression in life. And I've experienced that myself, so I speak with a firsthand knowledge of that.
Wow, amazing. Sacha, where does the heart come into all of this?
Well, I think the heart is vastly overstated and overrated in that sense. I mean, and the heart as an organ is exquisite, is extraordinary. But I think that we need to place emphasis on unifying this center and the heart center, and bring these into complete coherence with the with the navel, with the psionic center, the true heart, the atom seed of who you are, who you be in this mortal realm, issues from the navel, not from the heart. Remember, it's the navel connected to the umbilical cord that is the genesis point of the biological system that became you. Mm. And so that's really the point of communion, and the point of departure. The trial of separation goes back to that severance of the umbilical cord. And so I think when we learn to put the mind and the heart, which is the intellectual, psycho-intellectual, and the emotional body, if we learn to phase those two so that they literally phase each other out into still point, and then bring that quanta of the phase cohered mind and heart, bring those bodies, the mental body and the heart body, into the psionic center. I think some real magic occurs at that point. So I think that the heart, in the main, is it is fine, but on its own, it's of little to no consequence.
Yes, yes, it's the integration of the whole, right? But
Yeah,
do you
indeed.
find that some men, until they've healed, are bypassing the heart? And do you
Yeah.
feel it's important to, for a while, become aware of the heart and then to be able to integrate it?
Yes, I do. I do. I do. I understand that for some men it's very important, but I know some men who I've known for many, many years, who have been doing men's circles and drumming circles and prayer circles and all of these kinds of ceremonial practices, and they're just as fucked up today as they were 25 years ago, and have not gained, by best accounts, much clarity in what it is to be a realized man in all that time with all that ceremonial bullshit. And that's because they're going into those circles, telling themselves a story, but they're not being foundationally authentic or in integrity. They don't understand pure truth. They're still weak and are still easily led by the nose or by the dick. And that's a problem. That's a problem. So those men are, by best accounts, exploring the metric of the heart, through all this ceremonial circle jerking, but it doesn't mean for one moment that they have arrived at the Christed heart, which is the one that does not negotiate pure truth or right action. It cannot negotiate it. Either we're in absolute integrity or we're not.
That's right.
Either we're playing in the shadowlands or we're not. It's non-negotiable. So that's why I'm somewhat reluctant to be drawn into the conversation about men and hearts and heartfulness, because it really takes us into having to qualify, what do we mean by that? I care about men who are actualized. I care about men who are standing in the flame of pure truth and hurting like hell in that space, and yet continuing to stand in that flame and taking on the battles every day with the so-called authorities and with these satanic bureaucrats and technocrats that proliferate and violate every single aspect of our lives and of their families' lives. Those are the men that I love. The men who take up the sword of St. Michael every single day to every dirty little official or technocrat or policeman or man in costume or woman in costume or third-party interventionist. Those are the men that I love and care about, the ones who have the stamina and don't cower behind their sofa, and don't cower behind spiritualized language either, even worse than cowering behind a sofa.
And as a woman, I totally resonate with that as well. Sacha, what's your final message to men who are becoming aware now that they have been in a system of control and are wanting to break free? Can you speak to those men, please?
It's hard to be unprepared at midnight on a question like that, because it's something which I would normally want to give a little meditation or thought to. So I can't spontaneously speak any more profoundly than I have done in the last hour and 23 minutes on all of these different subjects, which all speak to the same thing, which is how do we navigate our authenticity? How do we stand in the flame of pure truth? How do we conduct right action in this world as a father, as a brother, as a man, as a lover, as a husband? All of the above, all of the above. I say that men get a pretty rough ride of it all. Just so you know, my battery's about to go. Let me just check what percentage I've got. Otherwise, I might have to run. I've got 10%. I'm good. I'm good. Men have a pretty rough ride of it, and in the main, in recent years, I think it's safe to say we all know by now that the woman's lib was a dirty psyop orchestrated by the satanic banksters in order to get two taxpayers out of every family and to also be able to snatch the kids away from the mother in kindergartens and in schools and begin the cultural Fabianist Marxist regime, which is now locked and loaded and kicked in fully. But men have always been forced either onto the battlefield to get blown up or have their skulls shot in, or be the ones to do the heavy lifting. And the not in all cultures, mind you. There are certain cultures where in Africa principally, which are pretty disgusting and egregious, where the men don't do the heavy lifting, the women do. In Bali, where I have a home, the women do the heavy lifting. The tukans, we call them, and they're women of a certain age, and they're the disposable ones, and they're the ones who do the backbreaking work. The men handle the tools and put one brick on top of another brick, but they'll never carry the bricks. That's the woman's job. It's an outrage, and they'll carry them in the jungles and up the ravines on 1,000 stairs, literally carrying these loads day after day after day. It's appalling. But that's written into that culture. Similarly, in parts of Africa, the women will be carrying all the goods and chattels on their head, literally mountains of it, and the babies under their arms and on their back and staggering along under the weight. And the man will be completely free with a loincloth and maybe a stick. And his argument is, I'm ready to protect my woman as we walk, to the town. Someone has to be prepared to protect her, and they buy that bullshit. I saw it in I think it was the Atlas Mountains as well, with the certain, I think it was the Berbers. I can't remember the Berbers or the Rif people. Some Moroccan might get pissed off with them and correct me on the thread on YouTube. But I remember seeing these women in the mountains doing this backbreaking work. It's like, what the fuck? Where are the men? Where are the men? And I was traveling at the time with the true king of Morocco. It was with the Moulay Ali Alaouai, beautiful, beautiful man, a beloved friend of mine years ago. And I was with him and a couple of the other princes, and we were on horseback going up the Atlas Mountains to the top to meet the 800-year-old vizier, the oracle of the royal household of the Maghrebs. And was being taken to meet this oracle by the royal house. And as we were going up, I remember seeing these small mountain people, but they were all women doing the heavy lifting and the toil and the labor, and they were little people as well. And I remember the prince said to me, oh no, he said, the men are all inside the caves. They're in the caves. They're not stupid. They're keeping cool inside the caves. So the men are inside the caves preparing the tea for the women, having a hookah pipe or whatever. So in multiple cultures around the world, women do the heavy lifting. But it's safe to say that in 95+% of the cultures of the world, it's men who do the heavy lifting and the shitty work, and it's pretty thankless, But hey, I've not much else to add other than we're about to transcend culture altogether. We're about to transmute and harmonize this civilizational wheel that we've been living through at the collective level for thousands of years. It's all about to reach its
Amazing. Yeah.
and it's a beautiful time, resultantly, and we should all just be, I think, narrow our focus into being very present, being in a state of grace, not believing that we know too much about anything, and be in a state of receptivity so that we can receive the revelations as they unfold, which surely they do, and surely they are.
What an amazing conversation. Thank you so much, Sacha. Where can people find you?
I think the easiest thing is probably sachastone.com, and it's Sacha with a C, not an S, so it's SACHA. STONE, sachastone.com. And through that, they can get to the New Earth Horizon, which is the big website of the New Earth Project, or the Lazarus Initiative.com, which is accessible also there, and the Arise Guerrilla News Network, which is my kind of activist network, broadcasting network. So all the media, the shows, the symposiums, yeah, all of our goods are kind of accessible through the touchstone is sachastone.com.
That's wonderful. And I'll put the link in the description. Well, so much gratitude for you and all that you do, Sacha. Thank you for being a truth gladiator on planet Earth. If you could just stay on one moment so we can get the title. Sure. And thanks, everyone. And I'll see you in a few days for another episode of Heart Warriors. Thank you.